I wish I was seeing everybody under different circumstances and conditions. Our sympathies go out to the families of the victims, many of whom we just got to spend time with, some of whom do not know where their loved one is right now, many fearing and expecting the worst because they have not heard from them and have received no news. We also met incredibly heroic El Pasoans who have survived the most devastating injuries that I can imagine. Many of them shot many times over, who are pulling through right now. Just had a chance to talk to University Medical Center President Jacob Cintron, the nurses and the doctors who are taking care of these patients. Absolute all-time heroes. This community that is bringing more food than anybody can eat right now inside, that is donating more blood than we could have possibly expected. El Paso is really showing up and standing up for our fellow El Pasoans right now. Lastly, just want to say I'm so grateful to the El Paso Police Department and the first responders and everyone who is on the scene today, including many of you who have to live with something that we thought we would never, ever see in El Paso. More murders today than we have in an average year in the city of El Paso. We don't know all the details yet, and we await the completion of this investigation. But what I'm hearing from statements from the El Paso Police Department, preliminary indications that this is motivated by hatred, by racism, by an intolerance that is foreign to El Paso, and in fact had to be brought somewhere else into this community to do something like what we are seeing right now. And so I would just say that in addition to everything that we're doing for our fellow El Pasoans right now and meeting them in this time of suffering and need and crisis, in addition to making sure that we change our laws so that it's harder for something like this to happen again, I think we also have to ask ourselves about the level of hatred and racism that we're seeing in this country right now that could lead to an event like the one that we saw here today. And that is on all of us to both call out and to stop, and in our case in El Paso, to be the example of how we don't just respect one another, we embrace our differences as the very source of our strength. So could not be more proud of El Paso and the way that we're responding to this tragedy today. Happy to take your questions.
Sir, regarding the manifesto and everything that was in it, fears about Hispanic immigration and all that, does any of this fall at the feet of President Donald Trump and his rhetoric that's been growing over the last couple of weeks and his alleged racist tweets and other rhetoric?
Yes, we've had a rise in hate crimes every single one of the last 3 years during an administration where you have a president who's called Mexicans rapists and criminals. Though Mexican immigrants commit crimes at a far lower rate than those born here in the country, he has tried to make us afraid of them to some real effect and consequence. Attempting to ban all Muslims from this country. The day that he signed that executive order, the mosque in Victoria, Texas was burned to the ground. Those chants that we heard in Greenville, North Carolina, send her back, talking about our fellow American citizens duly elected to represent their constituents in the Congress who happen to be women of color. He is a racist, and he stokes racism in this country, and it does not just offend our sensibilities, it fundamentally changes the character of this country, and it leads to violence. And again, there are still details that we are waiting on, but I'm just following the lead that I've heard from the El Paso Police Department, where they say there are strong indications that this shooter wrote that manifesto and that this was inspired by his hatred of people here in this community.
Have you met any of the witnesses? With the patients, like, what did you tell them, and what did they tell you?
I told them I am so amazed at how strong they are. We met a woman who was shot in the chest. The bullet passed through her lungs. She's having her lungs drained of fluid right now. She has learned that her mother, who was with her, was shot, that her aunt was shot as well. Three family members, all of whom are shot, all of whom are pulling through here tonight, all of whom are surrounded by family. and these extraordinary nurses and doctors and frontline staff here at University Medical Center. We're hearing very similar things about the staff at Del Sol. Those waiting rooms are full of people. Met a woman just now who said that she hasn't been able to hear anything about her husband for the last hour. He was also shot in the chest, has not been as responsive, but the doctors tell her that he seems to be doing better minute by minute. But I can only imagine what she is feeling right now. And she told me and Amy, she said, this has got to change. She said, this keeps happening in this country. Why is this happening? Why do we allow this to happen? This has to change. Her husband and other members of the family and their little children were all at a table selling merchandise to raise funds for the soccer team that he coaches. Doing something great for their community. Never expecting something like this to happen. And now pulling for her husband to make it through right now, and her kids witnessed the entire thing. So many families, so many extraordinary people, so much hope in that waiting room right now, so much strength in the individual ICU rooms that we got to be in. Again, it makes me just incredibly proud of El Paso and of these people, these survivors. But they're also asking us to do something about this. And yes, it's the gun laws. Yes, it's the universal background checks. And yes, we should stop selling weapons of war into our communities. But I think we also have to confront this hatred that I have never seen in my lifetime. And we certainly have not seen in El Paso. Some years in a city of almost 700,000, we had 5 murders the entire year. Our average over the last 10 years is 18. We exceeded that average just on one day. This is not normal. It is not acceptable. We cannot just move on from this. And the folks that I just met do not want us just to move on from this.
¿Pudieras expresarme eso en español? Eso que sí. Es muy importante que hay esas muertes en todo el año y hoy
sí.
Se dieron en un solo día.
Sí. Pues en un año en esta comunidad tan segura tenemos casi 18 muertos. Hoy 20 en un evento. Desde alguien que es de la área cerca de Dallas, Texas, que pensamos tiene odio para los hispanos, gente de México. Alguien que es diferente de la comunidad de El Paso y quiere quitar algo tan importante que tenemos aquí, la seguridad que depende en los migrantes, en la gente que están aquí por generaciones, gente que llegaron ayer en esta comunidad, todos contribuyendo al éxito y también la seguridad que tenemos aquí. Después necesitamos hacer todo lo que podemos para las víctimas, pero también todo lo que podemos hacer para cambiar nuestras leyes y también cambiar este nivel de odio que tenemos contra los migrantes aquí en una administración con un presidente que habla sobre los migrantes con odio, con miedo. Y yo pienso que es posible que tenemos como resultado del odio que tenemos en este país, que tenemos del presidente.
Time for one more. So the national spotlight has been El Paso for some time, and this just adds filter that with another layer to that. So moving forward, between our first responders, PD, every single agency here, community, and the nation as a whole, what has to happen?
Perhaps in a community where it is so rare to learn that somebody has been murdered in one of the least violent places in the United States of America, owing in some part to the fact that we're a community of immigrants. There are people who've been here for generations. There are people who've been here for a matter of days, all of them contributing to our security and our safety. It's really important that the country knows that this is not us, that it took somebody from outside of El Paso coming in, bringing their hatred and perhaps reflecting the hatred and the fear espoused by this president, who's trying to teach the country to be afraid of immigrants, who he falsely blames for violence in our communities, or disparages those who do not look like or have the same traditions of faith as the majority of this country. It takes something so foreign to El Paso to do something like this in El Paso. And the message has to be that more than just changing our laws, which is very important, especially as we get the details about how he acquired this firearm, what his background is, other details about his life, but the level of open hatred and racism and intolerance that we have in this country right now, there's a very real mortal consequence to that we are seeing all over this country, here in El Paso, in synagogues outside of San Diego and in Pittsburgh. I mentioned the mosque in Victoria, Texas, being burned to the ground. Hate crimes on the rise, every single one of the last 3 years. Folks, this did not happen by accident. We cannot just pretend that this is who we are, our fate, our future, our fortune. This is owing to the rhetoric used by some for political gain, to drive us further apart, to make us afraid. And we've got to stand up to it, and we've got to provide a much more positive alternative. And that alternative to me is the city of El Paso and everything that you're seeing right now in response to what has happened here today. Thank you.
What can you say to the people of El Paso to help them get through this?
I am just so proud of the people of this community. All of those that I just met who were shot, who are pulling through despite terrible injuries, who are there with their families, who are bringing them through right now. The amazing medical providers and first responders who are on the scene. This community that's coming together, the fact that at our blood banks today, there were too many people and we had to take reservations for people to come back tomorrow. This community has really turned out in an overwhelming showing of love and support and encouragement. But I'm also hearing from this community that we cannot accept this and we cannot allow this to be our fate. And I heard that directly from the family members who have a loved one who is hanging on for dear life right now. I really see this community, as we have in so many issues, taking the lead and making sure that we are the counter to not just this violence, but this hatred that produces this violence right now. Very, very proud of El Paso, of how strong we are and how resilient we are.
Thank you, everyone.